In the second video, we take the previous scene and transform it into this. We are going to add 3D models and textures and configure them so that they are ready to be used. We are also going to modify the default sky. Let's get started. In the description, there's a link to a shared folder where you will find all the models and textures. Please download both folders. First, we will import the textures. Inside Unity, we select the texture folder of our project, then in the downloaded files, we select all the folders that are inside the texture directory and drag them to Unity. We do the same with 3D models. We are going to remove all objects from the scene except the floor, character, and camera. We take the newly imported scene elements model and drag it into the hierarchy. I'm going to scale the ground a little bit so that there are no elements floating in the air. Now we are going to configure the material of the floor. Previously, we have defined a brown color. Let's put it back to white. We select the floor textures folder and start adding the textures to the material. The albedo defines the color, so we drag the color texture and drop it on the albedo slot, then the metal texture, and then the normal map. In this last case, we must click on Fix Now to indicate that this texture is a normal map. With the tiling parameter, we configure how many times the texture is repeated in the geometry. In my case, 100 for X and 100 for Y works well. I will also reduce a bit the smoothness of the surface. I'm going to put the textures of the walls in place. Let's start with the corridor. For some reason, when the models were imported, the materials were not. When we select an object, we see that the materials are disabled. If that happens to you, go to the Models folder, select the first file to view its properties in the inspector, and in the Materials tab, click on Extract Materials. I will create a folder called Materials to place them. Now we see that inside this folder are all the materials that come with the model. When we select a piece of wall, we see that the materials are now enabled. Let's repeat this for the other models. We take the textures corresponding to the corridor and add them to the material. Let's continue with the crossroads model. Note that when I have the model selected, in the inspector appear its properties. And when I click on a texture, for example, the inspector changes and shows the properties of the texture. There are occasions when it's necessary that the inspector not change its content. That's what the little padlock in the top right corner is for. Pressing it locks the inspector no matter what the selection is. Now we can add the textures corresponding to the crossroads. For the other textures, let's do it another way. We open the folders containing the materials and lock it with the padlock. Then, in any of the other windows, click on the icon in the upper right corner, Add tab, and click on Project. Now we have two tabs corresponding to the project. Let's go to the Walls and Gates folder and also block this window. With both windows locked, I select in one project tab the material and in the other project tab the textures. I'm going to speed up the footage while I add the rest of the textures. In the Models folder, I select the pedestal with the sword and drag it to the hierarchy. Some models come with an ambient occlusion texture, the name of which ends with the letters A, O in caps. These textures are placed in the occlusion slot. I place the clock model in the hierarchy, and for the material of the hands, I will simply choose a black color. I set the textures of the numbers, and for the metal base, I will select a slightly opaque yellow. Then change the metallic properties and smoothness until it resembles a metal. We put on the rest of the textures, and finally make sure that the two metallic materials of the clock match approximately in color. Once all the models in this stage are configured, I close the project tab and proceed to create prefabricated objects, aka prefabs, which are important because with them we can create several instances of the same object. To create a prefab, we take an object from the hierarchy and drag it to a folder in the project tab. To create a new instance of the object, drag the prefab to the scene. The new object is added to the hierarchy. Let's do the same for the pedestal and for each part of the wall. Now we are going to work on the sky of the scene. In the prefabs folders, right-click, create, material and give it a name. Block the Inspector tab with the Material Properties. From the Shader drop-down menu, select the option 6-sided Skybox. Here we'll place the images we downloaded in the previous video. Let's place every image in its corresponding slot. To change the skybox of the scene, go to Windows, Lighting and Settings. I'm going to drag this tab and drop it next to the inspector. In the first element called Skybox Material, we click on the icon of the point on the right and select the material we have just created. We immediately see how the lighting of the scene changes. I'm going to tweak the orientation of the light to match approximately the position of the sun. First, I zero all the components of the rotation, then I press E to adjust the angles. I will also adjust the color to match the skybox lighting. We should make a prefab of the character, because we're going to need it to instantiate the character in a random position. I'm also going to create some folders to sort the prefabs. Now I'm moving the character to a proper position. The scene looks pretty dark, so I'm going to add one more directional light pointing downwards. This light shouldn't cast shadows. We select a color according to the scene and adjust the intensity of the source until we get the result we like. Right now, I'm rearranging the objects. Let's test the scene. So far, it seems to be working properly. For now, the objects have colliders, which are entities that allow, among other things, simulating the physics of the game. That's why the character can get through the walls. We make a compilation with build and run, and that's it for now.